Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hossy's Huddle. In this video, we're going to go over two trades that just came through the mill this morning and talk about their impact on the teams involved and everything around the league. But really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe down below. And with that said, let's get started. So I woke up this morning. I thought maybe I wouldn't have to record a video today. I have a day off, just record for 3 days in a row. But then I look at my phone and we have two trades that just came through the league this morning, and I think they're two trades that actually have a lot of significance here. And we'll start talking about the first one here, which is the big one, obviously, with quarterback Vernon Adams Jr. getting traded to the BC Lions for a first-round pick, presumably in 2023. Couldn't find the exact year, but assumably this is going to be for the coming draft this year. And I think for the BC Lions, first of all, this is a potential season-saving move. Obviously, we saw what they looked like without Nathan Rourke the first time last week. It did not look great from the quarterback position. The combination of Michael O'Connor and Antonio Pipkin did not look like the greatest and didn't look like they're have what it takes really to lead this team into a contender status going into the playoffs like they were looking like when they had Nathan Rourke. And Vernon Adams, I'm not too sure if he's going to be able to do it, but he sure as hell is going to bring excitement to this BC Lions lineup. He is better than what they have at that position right now, and apparently he's completely healthy after suffering an injury. I forget what the injury was, but he was on the 6-game injury list with Montreal. Apparently that injury is history, and he's really healthy, and he's ready to go for the BC Lions the rest of the way this season. So it'll be interesting to see when he takes control of the starting job here. Ironically, a good comparison is last year with Trevor Harris getting traded midway through the season. They let Matthew Schultz get a couple more starts, but when Matthew Schultz started to struggle just a little bit, that's when Trevor Harris took over the job, and I think that's what's going to happen here in BC with Michael O'Connor and Antonio Pipkin. I'm assuming one of those guys is going to start next week, but once Vernon Adams gets a good feel of the offense, they feel comfortable putting him out there. I think within the next couple of weeks, we'll see him start games for the BC Lions down the stretch this season, and I think it's going to be very, very exciting. Also, it's worth noting that if Nathan Rourke does still go to the NFL this offseason, this gives them an option for quarterback in 2023, worth noting there. And then I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this team going forward with those great receivers that the Lions have. Can Vernon Adams fully take advantage of it? He's a guy that can avoid a lot of sacks as well with his athleticism, and that should help playing behind an offensive line that I still have questions about post Nathan Rourke here. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens for this trade from the BC Lions perspective. And then from the Montreal perspective, they get a first-round pick back in the deal. Not a bad return for a guy that they simply were not going to use going forward for this team. But at the end of the day, they are left without a quality backup quarterback. They do have Dominic Davis, who has seen some time in the past as a CFL starter, but he's not a guy that inspires a lot of confidence, especially from a passing perspective. He's just a really good short yardage guy, in my opinion. But they are high on Davis Alexander, who had a good preseason. Maybe he gets the backup role going forward primarily for this team. But at the end of the day, I think that leaves them a little bit vulnerable to a Trevor Harris injury later on this season. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think they had a lot of clashes of egos in that locker room with Vernon Adams and Trevor Harris. Obviously, Trevor Harris is their guy going forward, so they wanted to make that apparent, and this move does this. And the most interesting thing about it is that minority owner Gary Stern, who I just announced, or I made a video about him announcing that he has resigned from the CFL's Board of Governors earlier this week, he was apparently blocking trade attempts to trade Vernon Adams away. He was a very loved guy within the Montreal community. He was a very beloved player by the fans, and it was understandable. He was my favorite player on the Alouettes going into this season, and he was still my favorite player on the Alouettes before this trade went down. But at the end of the day, it's just business in the CFL, and Montreal just saw their quarterback situation differently. So very disappointing for Vernon Adams. He looked so promising for that Montreal Alouettes franchise back in 2019, playing at a legit MOP level, but then it comes to a crashing halt this season, and it's very disappointing to see. One last note here before we go on to the other trade. I wanted to just mention that the last couple of years, Montreal Alouettes GM Danny Machocha / head coach now has done a really good job of rebuilding the Canadian talent on this roster, and he gets another first-round pick here. He was in a really terrible position when he took over the job because of that Johnny Manziel trade that traded away 2 first-round picks to Hamilton. So they've done a really good job the last couple of years of rebuilding that Canadian talent on that roster, and he gets another first-round pick here in this deal. Now let's move on to this second trade that makes me scratch my head a little bit from one side of it, and that side is the Edmonton Elks, who acquire defensive end Avery Ellis for an undetermined draft pick that wasn't listed by the time I recorded this video. And in exchange, the Montreal Alouettes get defensive back Nafees Lyon and defensive lineman Thomas Costigan. And I think this is really confusing because I thought Costigan and Lyon were becoming pretty core members of that Edmonton Elks defense. Clearly, they weren't seen as building blocks going forward for Chris Jones because they're not getting a whole lot back in return here with Avery Ellis, who really fell into favor the last couple of weeks here with Montreal, with Mike Moore moving out to defensive end and them starting someone else on the interior. And I think that was really the falling out there for Ellis in Montreal. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're getting a lot of value back for 2 really promising players here. I really liked Thomas Costigan in his first year in the CFL last year. I think he was one of their more higher performing players on defense this year, at least from an effort standpoint, and I think they're going to miss him. Nafees Lyon had a couple of really good moments, I think, playing the corner position for this team this year. So it's a very confusing trade for the Edmonton Elks because I don't think Avery Ellis is going to help them in a significant way. He's probably going to start at defensive end for them, but I don't know how much he's going to help the rest of the way. He's a veteran player in this league, likely going to leave in free agency, if I was to guess. And then the draft pick, unless it's a first-round pick, which I think they would have said if it was a first-round pick going to Edmonton's way, I don't know how this is going to help the Elks going forward, so that's why I was really confused by it. But for the Alouettes, I really love this trade because I think you add 2 really quality players here to this defense that has played really well at points this year, but could use the reinforcements, especially I think in the secondary. I think the defensive line is going to welcome the addition of Thomas Costigan, but they didn't necessarily need the depth. One thing I really do like about Costigan is that he's a guy that can contribute on the inside and the outside, so look out for that for Alouettes fans going forward the rest of the season. But I think this is a really good trade for the Alouettes, and at the end of the day, I think they got pretty good value for both of these trades that they made today. But with that said, those are just my thoughts on the trades that went down this morning in the CFL. Be sure to let me know in the comment section all your thoughts on these trades. And with that said, hope everyone has a great day. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.